Okay, so here we are back in Maya with my bouncing ball rig referenced into the scene. So I've got my reference ball connected in here. If you remember from our first lesson, we set up our animation scene by coming down to this animation preferences button. The time slider region, we just want to make sure it's set to real time. That our animation is set to allow weighted tangents and linear in and out tangents by default. And that's all we need to do. Again, I'm going to leave auto keying off for now. We'll probably turn it on later because that's how I normally work, but this just keeps us out of trouble for now. So I'm going to hit save. And in addition to this, I have my notes right off screen, which I've taken from the diagram. It would be good to have the diagram open as well to remind you what happens, but I oftentimes have a little list of what it is that I'm attempting handy and available, especially during the blocking phase, which is what this is. Blocking meaning that you're putting all of the primary positions in place before you do polishing moves and attempt to make the motion very nice and smooth and refined. So this is my recipe, so to speak. Okay, so I'm going to put that off screen. That's just going to be for me to refer to. You can write down your own from the last video, which is a good practice to do. Also, since this is a diagram, we're not going to animate in this perspective view here. We're going to animate in orthographic view. So I'm going to come up to Panels, Orthographic, and we'll do Front again. So we're going to animate this entire motion moving along here in this view. We don't need to see the tail, so I'm going to go ahead and hide the whole tail by using the tail control. We do want to be careful, however, selecting these controllers. I'm just going to tap spacebar. Oops, maybe I can't do that. I guess my software capturing is preventing me from doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and pop back up to perspective using this button here. But we want to be careful just to select this controller for now. Since this is going to be only for rolling, this is going to be only for adjusting the squash and stretch, which we didn't plan for, by the way. We didn't plan any squash and stretch in this. But we just want to make sure to grab only this controller. So I'm going to select it here so I can be absolutely sure that's what I have selected. Then I'm going to go back over to my orthographic front view. Okay, so I'm going to try to use this total screen space for my entire animation. I'm going to try to not move the screen after this, just so that I know it starts over here somewhere and it ends over here. So that's my entire space to do my animation in. We need to set up the amount of time that we're going to need on this time slider. First, I'm just going to drag this sampling range out to the full length out here. And we need to set our full animation running time to 60 frames. We could set it to a little bit more if we'd like some dead space at the end of the animation just for the ball to come to rest. But I'll go ahead and just set it to 60 so it's not confusing. So we've got our beginning time at 1, our sampling range at 1, our sample range at the full 60, and our full animation play at 60 down here. Okay? So on frame 1, the first thing that we have to do is we have to do an apex. So we have to be able to move this up in the air, okay, somewhere. And I'm only going to place it about here so that we don't have to have really large bounces diminishing too quickly. It would make it look flat. So I'm going to place this right here. By the way, since we know that these two motions, the vertical motion and horizontal motion, are discrete, they're separate from each other, in other words, we could just model a bouncing ball in place and then put the sideways motion on afterward. But for simplicity's sake, for maybe people who might be confused by that, I'm just going to model everything together all at once. It's going to create a lot of superfluous keyframes. And then we're going to fix it with the graph editor just to show what a powerful referencing tool that can be. Okay? So the two channels I need are my translate Y, which is the vertical motion, key selected, and I also need translate X, as we can see right here. That's going to be my sideways motion, key selected. Later on, we might use some of this rotation on this primary controller or this squash and stretch, but for now, that's the motion that we need. Okay, so that's frame 1. So frame 12, I'm going to pop over to frame 12. I need it to come down to the ground. So I need it to hit the ground, which would be 0 if we want to enter in the number up here. And it needs to advance in a somewhat distant advancement here, so it's a nice big bounce, and we'll diminish that by eye as we go on. Once again, these guesses are probably going to be incorrect as we go, but that's okay. We're going to fix it all in the graph editor afterwards, so don't be too precious with this. So I just selected both of these. You can select both of them just by holding shift and selecting more than one channel. Okay, so frame 18 is the apex of our next bounce, so I'm going to move it up some ratio lower than my first bounce, so maybe like halfway. We'll fix that ratio in the graph editor. It's key selected. Then we want to go to 24, which is the contact of our bounce. Go right about there. Key selected. 27, the apex of our current bounce. Whoops, I hit right mouse button just then. So let's bounce that up in the air. Okay, and move it forward again. Key selected. Let's see, we've got 30, which is our next hit. Move it forward again, down to the ground. This one with the purple line is the ground. Key selected. Okay, let's see, we've got 32. We're almost to our dribbles. Okay, 32. Key selected. 34. It's our contact. Key selected. I'm using both channels. Let's see, where are we at? 34, 35. So this is the dribbling. So up for only one frame, so it's going to be fairly small. This is the largest dribble though, so I'm going to try to make it a little bit bigger than the rest. I didn't move forward. Okay, just going to move forward first. There we go. Okay, so this is going to be a larger dribble, so about that much, a little less than half of a grid square it looks like for that. Key selected. 36 contacts the ground. And moving forwards, go. Key selected. 37, another dribble, smaller than that one. 37, did I do it wrong? No, it looks okay. Oh, I did do it wrong. So let's see, 35 was a dribble. 36 should be a contact on the ground. Sorry about that. That's why I have this list up next to me though, so I can make sure to get all this right. So up, down, this one should be up. Okay, less than the first one. Move forward. Key selected. So I probably have a fairly big error right there in my animation, but that's what the graph editor is going to help me out with. I'm going to be able to see all those relationships and fix it up. Okay, 39 should be up. Very, very small now. Key selected. 40 down. I believe this is our... Nope, this is not our final hit. This is our second to last hit. Key selected. Hit 41. As tiny as I can make it. Upward. And then 42 is our final hit with the ground. So for Y, I'm just going to enter in 0 to make sure that it stays right on the ground. And X, I'm just going to scoot it forward again. Key selected. Okay. Then after 42, our last keyframe is at 60, and it's our stopping position. So we'll hop all the way over to 60, move this ball to our ending roll position, which would be about right here. And we can just key both of them again. Key selected. Okay, so if you work through that with me, you should be able to play it and get something resembling a bounce, but it is going to look pretty bad at this point. That's okay. Okay, we're just modeling this motion out. This is our first blocking pass. We're going to fix this blocking pass right now in the graph editor. Okay, so that's how mine looks right now. So it's just moving up and down, generally trotting along, and we have no rotation. That's okay. We're not modeling the rotation just yet. So let's go ahead and open up the graph editor and take a look at the guesses that we made. So here we've got a bunch of different lines now. If you want to frame everything in the graph editor at once, you can hit the F key and it will show all of our different channels all at once. But let's concentrate on one at a time. Okay. First of all, let's look at the translate Y channel, which is our vertical channel up and down. I'm just going to hit F again so it frames this together. And this doesn't look half bad, not too bad here. We're started at about 8. Looks like we've returned to around 4, or a little over 4. After that, we've got this diminishing return that's probably a little bit extreme. I'm going to just poke that up a little bit there. maybe move this one down. Okay. Then we've got about halfway again here. I can start zooming in. Zooming in the graph editor is just rolling up and down. And if you want to scale the graph, you can hold down Alt and Shift and drag right mouse button. Left and right stretches it this way. Up and down stretches it this way. This is really good to get a better view of your graph, so don't just look at it in one way. So this looks like a little bit too much, so I'm going to hold down Shift and middle mouse drag it upward just a little. Same for this first dribble. Then I'm going to reduce that one a little bit. Go ahead and squeeze this in here. And I can see a lot of my contacts are below the ground here. So I'm going to grab these points that should be on the ground. And up here in the graph editor, we've got the two dimensions of these points. We've got the frame here on the left-hand side and the value on the right. If you change the frame, all of these points will snap to one point and you'll ruin your animation. But this second one, the value, we can just enter in 0 for all of those and hit enter, and they're all snapped back up to the line. So that's those points fixed. And I'll go ahead and do that for these as well, so that I'm sure that it's always touching the ground exactly. Okay, so that looks like a nice diminishing bounce there. I like the look of this. When I stretch this out, you can almost see that all together they make a little bit of like a curve towards this bottom line, so it's sort of easing in the amount of bounce over the tops of these lines, which is nice. Okay, now we want to look at the translate X, and this is the one I expect to be very messed up. Yeah, it doesn't look like anything even remotely like an ease in at this point. So knowing that we don't really need these points in the middle, we're just trying to model a constant ease in, and we were just estimating based on position. What we can do is we can just go ahead and delete all of these middle positions here. Okay, and we can take this last point and flatten it out just like we did with our ease in exercise. So we're going to make sure that it's moving more quickly at the beginning and slower and slower and slower to the end. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and refine this right now. I'm going to free the tangent weights, grab this handle, and scale it out so that it is moving more slowly towards the end and more quickly towards the beginning. Okay, so we haven't done any refinement with this yet. We just cleaned it up a little bit. By the way, these extra 2 channels are a product of the automatic squash and stretch control, so you can just ignore those. Please don't delete that animation. That's just set driven key animation. Okay, so let's go ahead and watch this, see what that looks like. Okay, still not really a bouncing ball, but it's starting to look somewhat nice moving along here. By the way, sometimes these combinations of channels can get confusing to look at. Like, it's very hard to see just the sideways motion right now. So if that does get confusing, what we can do is we can mute channels in order to more easily see some of the other channels. So for instance, I'm going to mute translate Y. So I'm going to grab that channel, right click, and mute selected. That way I'm only seeing the animation information for translate X at this point, which is a nice ease in. Okay, and I could do the same thing with my other channel while I'm refining my bounce. I could just turn off the translate X if I choose. So I'm going to unmute that, unmute selected, and here's our animation as it stands right now.